Hi everybody, Jim Ostrowski back with an unprecedented second Liberty Moving podcast in one day. It's a big day. It's a big day. This is one of the biggest things I've ever done. Put out the Affordability book. Been working on it for several months, but really since the early 80s. Just going to talk a little bit about it, and because I'm going to be doing a bunch of podcasts on this. The book is live on Amazon. I'm looking for people to go out and buy a couple copies. If you got a couple of bucks and you want to buy 50 copies, I'll give you a bulk discount. Give it to the people who are graduating from your local high school, whatever, however you want to slice and dice that, your relatives, Christmas presents, birthday presents. So, how did I get into this? It's really kind of a long story. I could probably talk about it for way longer than anybody wants to hear. But I read Power and Market in like 1982. Rothbard, who later was my teacher a couple years later, he taught in Brooklyn. I was going to Brooklyn Law School. He obviously lived in Manhattan in the 80s, so I got to know him. I wish I'd gotten to know him a lot better, but we had him speak at Brooklyn Law School. We went up to his apartment. My late roommate, classmate in law school, Mark Rogers, had a great dinner with him. Saw him lecture many times, starting in 1980, and then the pinnacle was being invited to his private seminar in the history of economic thought, which later led to, boy, glad we got some shade. Later led to a 2-volume publication on the history of economic thought, and hadn't really thought much about regulation. Until I sort of dug into Power and Market. He has probably the best discussion of regulation in the economic literature, subsequently advanced upon by several economists who are mentioned in the book, including Per Bylund. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. But it's always occurred to me that we've never been able to measure the actual impact of regulation. And in many ways, it's worse than taxes. And in fact, I conclude in the book that it is worse than taxes. And it was always my sort of intuition that if you added all of the forms of government intervention together, in addition to taxes, which obviously are very quantifiable, that the total burden of government is way bigger than anybody had really imagined or documented. But I couldn't really do that numbers crunching or research. I didn't have a research budget. I'm not a statistician. I'm not an economist. But all that changed when AI came along, because AI is controversial, I know. I have concerns about AI like every other human being does, and I express them frequently in private conversation. But right now, it's a tool that most people are using. They say if you're not using it, the people you're competing with are using it. So I'm using it, and it has the ability to scour just huge quantities of information, and then put together data in a way that, in all honesty, I don't understand how it works. But I know it works. And so basically, I wrote the book myself. All the ideas are mine. All the writing is mine. I don't believe AI wrote a single sentence in the book. I think I asked them about some word choices once or twice, which is kind of like checking a thesaurus. But the actual calculations are done by Grok, Super Grok. But then I reserve the right to say, well, that seems a little high or seems a little low. And why do I have the right to say that? Because I'm one of the most experienced, I'm sorry for bragging. I'm one of the most experienced policy analysts in the country. I've been doing it since like the early 80s. I've had a number of publications. They're all mentioned in the book. So, ultimately it comes down to sort of common sense. If you think an estimate is too high, too low, I explained all that in the book. But what we were able to do with the assistance of AI was really take into account the 6 major forms of supra-minimal state intervention. In other words, the minimal state does lots of stuff, and we're not talking about the minimal state here. We're talking about, on top of the libertarian minimal state, which is admittedly controversial, what really does the government do above and beyond that? And I have 6 different categories of things that it does, which I talked about in Progressivism, a primer. This is sort of old stuff. Government basically does 6 things: regulation, taxes, inflation, war, conscription, eminent domain. If I've left anything out, let me know. Admittedly, regulation carries a lot of the work there. So I was able to, using AI for the first time ever, do an overall calculation of the burden of government on the average person. So we previously had, Tax Freedom Day, and that was like usually that was the day that you paid all of your taxes. But now we have, with the help of the book, Government Takes 80%. It's on Amazon. We have Freedom from Government Day, and it's October 19th. So that's really what the book does with the assistance of AI. Everything is explained in the book. What we do is, I say we because it's me and AI, as I've already explained, the division of labor. So basically, what we did is talk about what was the cost of government in 1900. And there was a government in 1900. The United States had been, a country for quite some time, a civilization for even longer. And it was a very successful country. Around 1875, the U.S. surpassed England as the #1 economy on earth. It was, by all accounts, a thriving country. All sorts of problems and so on, and there was poverty, but there was less poverty then than there had been previously. There was progress, and there was a vast improvement of living standards, health standards, life expectancy, and so on. But even though there had been a well-established government for quite some time, the overall cost of government in 1900 was only 10%. That's the estimate that we have. 7% taxes, 3% regulation. So then what we did, we compared that to 2026, and we focused on the major costs. Now, the conventional sources have had this argument with AI. Conventional sources say, what's the biggest expense for Americans? Well, it's housing, real estate. It's not. It's the government, obviously, and that's one of the things that we proved in the book. And hopefully that widespread misunderstanding will be corrected. One of the benefits of the book. We start out with the major costs of living for Americans. Obviously, taxes. Obviously, we're going to factor in inflation, which, although inflation is a huge factor in the economy, it's a huge factor, negative factor in affordability. On a year-to-year basis, it's not one of the biggest. It's large, but it's not one of the biggest factors. But it is factored in, and it's discussed, and the exceptions and caveats are all in there, with footnotes for further sources. So, in addition to real estate, housing, you've got education, you've got health care, transportation, food, and then we get into a lot of factors that the standard studies on regulation, which are done by the National Association of Manufacturers, they're basically focused on things that affect big business and industry, and my book is, I think, better and more comprehensive because I'm focused on the expenses that the average person faces, and we get into some things that that these numbers crunchers, cost benefit people have generally not gotten into. For example, traffic tickets, traffic court, traffic stops, the fact that you can't drive at a reasonable speed on a sunny day because of some arbitrary speed limit in the middle of nowhere. These are things that actually negatively affect your life. They negatively affect your bottom line. If you have to go to some driving school to get rid of the points on your license, that could cost you several $100s. In fact, I know that from personal experience, even though I've only had a couple speeding tickets in my whole life. So all these things are factored in. They're explained in the book. It's a short, very readable book. And ultimately, we come to the conclusion that government takes way more than the 30 or 35% you would think if you were focused primarily on taxes, as Tax Freedom Day has sort of trained libertarians to do. We also factor in Regulatory Freedom Day and Freedom from War Day and Freedom from Trade Restrictions Day and Freedom from Inflation Day. And again, all adding up to the fact that under our current form of progressive big government, you're not really free from government till October 19th. So until October 19th, you're basically working for the government. The government's taking a huge amount of your money, or the government is sort of destroying your wealth to the point where you're really only getting about 20% of the benefit of your labor as a worker, or your efforts as a small business person or entrepreneur. And this is really a revolutionary approach. It's an approach that the libertarian movement, which is, fallen on hard times, the Libertarian Party has become essentially irrelevant. I tried to change that by running for chair. I narrowly lost. But at the convention, I talked about how affordability is the leading issue. It's the second leading issue. It's the third leading. It's the only issue, affordability. So this is a book that I hope libertarians can get behind. And even if you're not a libertarian, or maybe you'll become a libertarian after you read the book. But I'm urging, I'm not going to be too long today. I'll do a bunch of more podcasts on this. I'll do a separate one on, one of the things that's in the book is the solutions chapter. There's actually, I don't do anything anymore unless I don't talk about any problems anymore unless I have some answers. So there is a solutions chapter. It's one of the longer chapters. And I have 8 direct action solutions. These are things that you can do without waiting for the politicians. And there's 8 major political solutions as well. If you want to, try to change politics, which is I'm already on record saying it's virtually impossible. But maybe the current crisis of affordability, which is, as I explained in the book, is leading to a drastic reduction in births, marriages, young people buying homes, is basically leading to the disintegration of the country. So maybe, as the Medicis used to say, the universal language is pain. Maybe there's enough pain out there facing the American people through this affordability crisis to get them to change their political views. And I'll just close on this note, do another podcast on affordability. I don't want to take up too much time at any one time. That it's not so much an affordability crisis, it's an ideological crisis, because basically the reason why government's so damn expensive is because we replaced the libertarian theory of the founders. They weren't all radical libertarians, but they were generally speaking overall libertarian in their philosophy, and some of them were explicitly libertarians like Jefferson. And around 1913, we replaced this with this silly psychotherapeutic ideology of progressivism. As I explain in my book on progressivism, it's not a rational system of thought. It's a form of emotional therapy. And I think that this makes kind of a nice sequel to progressivism, to say that, well, you can have this ideology, this feel-good ideology, where we're solving all these problems, but you're basically screwing the country, and it's too expensive, it doesn't work, and we need to get rid of it. So that's basically it. I'm urging everybody to who wants to, get the libertarian movement going again after a hiatus of a really long time when we've been a factor in American life. That's why I ran for chair. That's why I wrote this book. Liberty is the greatest idea in human history. And again, everything I do in politics, including this book, is designed to bring that idea out of the libertarian chess club, the tiny little libertarian meetings that we have, and bring it out into the general public and try to change the country and change history. So again, the book is Government Takes 80%. It's on Amazon today by Jim Ostrowski. Thanks everybody for your support and for listening to me.